This is what 20 years as a recruiter look like. It's a heavy job, you can tell that, right? So yeah, it's so good to be back in Netherlands. I'm from Sweden, and I can see that you use a lot of Swedish technology already. Mentimeter is a Swedish technology. Spotify, I heard. I used iSettle in the cab right towards here. That's also a Swedish company. So, but it's always good to be, and thank you, Bas, for inviting me back. I always feel like I'm not the sharpest knife in the shelf when I come here. And the reason for that, I think, is that I always end up speaking to people I think they speak in Swedish, but you guys speak Dutch. But the problem is that it sounds like Swedish, so it takes a few minutes for me to grasp that, and it's like, oh, it's a different language. So I always feel like I'm not the sharpest knife in the shelf. Anyways, I'm here to talk about how to eliminate bias with technology. But before, let's just give you my story as well, right? It's always good to understand where someone comes from in order to be so passionate about this. So, yeah, as I mentioned, I've been working in recruitment for almost 20 years. And I've been called a specialist. I've been called thought leader. That's a nice one. I've also been called evangelist. I'm not sure about that one. I don't really know what it means. But however, what you might not know is the first few years of my career, I was not a good recruiter. I was a really lousy recruiter, to be honest. And I thought it was really hard to understand what really made a good recruiter. Because I had a teacher in my early days as a recruiter that taught me that gut feeling, like how you feel in the stomach when you meet someone, that makes all the difference. So I tried to understand more about this gut feeling when I met candidates, and trying to understand what was a good fit and what was a bad fit. And obviously you can count like, yeah, was that really how you're supposed to do it? I tried, and the result was super bad. Sometimes it was good, I didn't really know why. Sometimes it was super bad, and I didn't really know why. And this mentor was really sort of into that. So it actually took me a few years to understand more about the fundamentals of recruiting. The fundamentals of knowing what was a good fit or not. And I am also into the space, so I'm definitely into bringing data into the point where we make good decisions. So I wanted to understand what types of decisions do we make with our gut feeling? What can we rely our gut feeling on? What sort of data brings a good decision? So yeah, not only that, as a recruiter, I had this fear. I had this constant fear of doing the wrong thing. I had this constant fear of leaving candidates with a bad experience. And all of a sudden, 99% of a recruitment process is a rejection letter or a rejection at some point. So 99% will naturally be disappointed in the process, right? So it's really hard not to be scared for that moment. But I also realized that I had nothing to come up with. I had nothing to bring to the table. Nothing with experience, nothing with this or that. So that was also one of the points. So just this winter, I did another test. I've been doing a lot of tests and studies on the market. And this winter, I did a test just to understand more of the question. So I went into the candidate space. As a candidate, I used another name, and I applied for 100 jobs in Sweden on the Swedish market, just to understand more what the candidates face when they apply for a job on the market. Did you know what happened? I used several different names, one foreign name, one typical Swedish name, a male name, a woman's name, and so on. What happened was that I, in 99% of the cases, didn't hear back until a few weeks. So that was the first thing. Does recruitment take that long? Candidates sit and wait for what? For a no? So I was into the space, and I'm trying to understand more of this. At one point, I think it was 70% of those processes, I got a direct return letter saying, yes, super cool, you applied for this job. Now we would like for you to do this, like 100 tests, assessments. And 3 hours later, I was finished. And I was like, okay, so now what? And that's when the next step and the next step. So I realized, well, recruitment still in 2023 takes too long. And candidates want to know more about the process initially, right? We want to know everything. We want to know what happened when I apply. So how can we be more transparent? So that's also one of the points. Like the fear of leaving candidates with this sort of lousy process, that was my biggest fear as well. So a few years later then, from after working with this gut feeling and everything, I ended up at a company called TNG, or the Next Generation. It's a very provocative and progressive and sort of forward-leaning recruitment agency in Sweden, focusing on unbiased recruitment. And I thought they had the answer to everything that I was asking. It's like, how do you provide data for a good decision? And they were like, yeah, we're working on this competency model. And I was like, that's interesting. So how do you provide transparency in the process? Well, we're working with this transparency process. All right, so what's your contribution to the market? All these kind of questions. And they're like, yeah, we want to make the labor market a better place. So I joined them as the Chief Innovation Officer because I had a lot to bring to the table. And I thought, why not put this in a context where we could automate the process as well, collecting all of that data points to replace that gut feeling and do that data points in a more contextual way. So we started working with, like, sort of pioneering different views. And as you can see at the bottom, that was actually the first innovation project that we did. It was called Matilda. It was a super cute little robot standing on a table. And we experimenting quite a lot with that one, trying to understand if we do the automation in the beginning of the process, let's say that we use assessments, good assessment tests and so on, and we can collect data from one point to another point, and then after that we can take the sort of try to push the limits of what unbiased recruitment is even into the interviewing process. Can we do that? And we tried experimenting with Matilda, and we're like, yeah, it could be done, but this is not probably it. So what Matilda did was she asked questions and she recorded the answer, and then you could say 1, X, or 2. You know, it's like, yeah, answer 1, answer 2, or answer 3. And then if it was the right answer, she would blink like in green or something. It was actually, yeah, it was fun, but it was a really lousy candidate experience. And from the point where we actually needed to collect more data, it just didn't have enough. So what we did was trying to prototype a new way, a new platform for pushing the boundaries of what unbiased recruitment really is. Using all that framework, all that knowledge that we had from the manual process in the recruitment process, in an unbiased process, and put that into a platform. So in 2018, we started experimenting with a platform called vertelde robotics. You've probably seen it because there is a platform here in Netherlands as well that is a company that is using the vertelde robot. So it's a social interviewing robot, or it's a social conversational platform, basically. So what we wanted to create was a situation where the candidates also felt that like they were safe and secure during this conversation, that it felt natural to have this conversation, but also collect the accurate data for a better hiring decision, basically. So we did this, and we launched that first product, and then the pandemic hit, and we were like, yeah, can we put this in a digital way as well? Can we use our phones? Can we use our laptops and whatever? Do we really need to go into an office to do an interview or not? So that's where we ended up with the Tengai avatar instead. So what the Tengai avatar actually does is to, you know when you have that feeling that you apply for a job and you feel like, oh, I'm such a good fit for this role, and you hit apply and then you're like, now what? that's the moment where you feel like, I just want to add something more to the process, right? I just want to show how good of a person I am, how good fit I am, a culture fit, everything, a whole shebang. That's where this process comes into play. So this is an opportunity for candidates to add more information to their process by having a nice conversation in real time at a place where they choose, preferably at home, in a quiet environment. They can prepare, they can practice. Someone mentioned sending interview questions before the interview. This is basically it. And really doing a conversation and answering questions from your own point of view. It's fully science-based. I will just show you briefly how it works. But the purpose is, first and foremost, to mitigate bias in the process. Because this product doesn't care who you are, where you come from, how you look, what your gender is, what your age is. In Sweden, we have a super problem with discrimination when it comes to age. That's the #1 reason for rejecting a candidate, that you feel like the candidate has the wrong age. So that's a huge problem. 58% of candidates feel like they have been rejected in a process due to age at some point in their career, and that's a very high number. So the first and foremost is to mitigate bias. The second part is to identify, of course, potential. From that data and from all of that information that we can collect, can we also put that into a context where we can make better decisions, understanding more of a candidate's potential for that specific role. But also, if we want to collect all that sort of data, that could be super boring because it's a lot of data points, it's a lot of information that we need to structure in a way so that it makes sense. And that is what the human brain does when we have a conversation. We make all these assumptions, we feel like something tickling in the stomach or whatever. That's all data. It's all data points. It's sort of micro decisions that we use for making a decision. Sometimes it's wrong. We don't really know how the data is being structured in our brains, but it's connecting something that makes us feel something. And that's the whole problem, because we are humans and we will always be biased. So how can we structure that data and put that into a context so the structure makes sense? And also doing that on the way, if we don't want our candidates to process a recruitment process that is 3 hours long or 100 tests or assessments, how can we do that and also increase the quality of hire from the candidate perspective? Like, how can we feel like it's fun, engaging at the same time as we apply for a job on your own terms? One of the great, I think, benefits from using this sort of technology is from the candidate perspective. You own your own data. You can practice as much as you want. You can change your answers if you want. And also, you only need to do it once. Then you can reuse your profile or your interview questions as many times as you want when applying for a job. So being a candidate, when I was from those 100 applicants or 100 applications, I only need to use my interview once. From the recruiter perspective, of course, there is a lot of benefits. Someone said here before, well, AI will always be better at decision-making or at collecting data and algorithms and so on than humans, and that's true. So just to that one. I'm on that team. But what it is basically is it's an avatar that will be your assistant, collecting all of this information that you need. I'm going to show you how it works, but it's measurable. It's also super affordable because we can do it in a large context. Doing this in a manual way will cost for several hundred recruiters. We can do this only once, of course. It's also transparent because all the interview answers, all the recorded data, everything is presented to the candidate as well. So all the results, everything is presented to the candidates. So you will always know how you performed, and it will always be different depending on the role you're applying for, because the data that's also being put into the systems, let's say that, okay, for a sales role, we want to measure that trait, social skills and whatever and whatnot. But for a different role, we would like to measure different kinds of data, and we would like to extract that data from the process as well. Let's say goal-oriented or super assertive or something like that. So it's always super transparent for the candidate as well. It's unbiased. It's super efficient, of course. I don't need to even mention that when it comes to technology. That technology is supposed to make our lives better. It's supposed to make our lives easier, but it's also supposed to make our lives with better quality, better decisions. So therefore, it's also candidate-centric. I think that's super important. When we apply technology into a superhuman process, which a recruitment process is, I know for once I joined recruitment because I like people, not machines. But in order for me to do my job better, I also need to make sure that all the candidates are being taken care of. Someone mentioned once that 99%, I mentioned that earlier too, 99% in a recruitment process get a rejection letter or a no. What if we can turn that 99% into potential? Wouldn't that be super nice? Everyone has their play, everyone has their potential. So we need to make sure that they also had a great journey along the way. The avatar then, that is the interface between the recruiter and the candidate. So the recruiter has one interface where they put in all the data they want to extract, and the candidate has another interface where they can be in control of their own data, listen to their own answers, look at the results, getting all their feedback and so on, and the avatar is in them between. That also makes sure that we don't judge anyone due to age or looks or gender. Everything is totally debiased, so to speak. I'm just going to show you a quick demo, because I know you're interested, and it's like, yeah, we've been speaking about this avatar for so long. What does it look like in action, right? I know you're curious, so this is it.
I'll now begin with some statements about you as a person. Bear in mind that some of these may not be so easy to answer, so please listen carefully as to how the statement is phrased before you respond. Keep in mind there is no right or wrong answer. However, try to always give answers that reflect you in a working environment. You can either respond with a short yes or no, or give a longer answer. If I don't understand you fully, I will ask you to clarify or sum up what you said. Don't worry, I'm sure it's going to be great. When at work, is it important for you to be effective in all situations and to always appear capable and competent? Thanks, let's move on. Would you describe yourself as someone who always has to set up goals, which you then work hard to achieve? Let's switch back to one of those past behavior questions. This time, it's about collaboration and teamwork. To begin with, I'll ask a general question. Then you'll get to describe an applicable situation. My first question is, what techniques do you use to create a good team spirit? I would like to know some more. Feel free to focus on how you view collaboration in comparison to conflict. The next step in this hiring process is that the recruiter will compare your answers with the job description and the required skills. And then the recruiter will get back to you with more information. I thought it was a really nice interview. If you have any further questions, please contact my colleagues. With that said, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.
Life feels easier with some confetti, right? At the end. You should celebrate going through a process that feels nice, that where you feel engaged on your own terms, in your own environment, not feeling the pressure from a sort of badass recruiter like myself, like asking all of those killer questions. An interview situation for most people is super stressful. We've all been there. It's hard, pulse goes up, you don't really know what the recruiter is looking for, you adjust, You know the drill. So this is an interview for the candidates on their own terms. And it's supposed to be used early in the process. So basically, you can interview all your candidates that applies. It only takes 20 minutes for the candidate, depending on how long answers you want to give, but approximately 20 minutes. From the recruiter standpoint, there is a lot to it. But in our product, we use a lot of advanced technology. We use human-like qualities. I think it's super important to also understand that when we have these conversations with candidates, we need to sort of mimic human behavior. Otherwise, we wouldn't trust it. Then it's just technology. And do we trust technology at this point? Well, maybe and maybe not. So we need to sort of definitely work with human-like qualities. And there is a natural language understanding processor in it, and a motor, an engine built into this product, so it understands what you say, but it's still humans that are making the decisions at the end. So for the recruiter, from the recruiter point, there's a recruiting hub that's the interface. I'm going to show you that a little bit more, but I'm thinking that you're more interested in understanding what kind of questions we use for the candidates. So we have different set of questions. Then there are additional questions or basic screening questions, such as, what's your availability? How do you see this or that? Do you have a driver's license? Do you speak Dutch? Do you speak Swedish? Do you have this sort of certain certificate? Whatever, screening cues, classic phone screening in questions. Then we have the personality traits. There are more in closed-ended questions or statements. Would you say that you are this or that? And then you will sort of make your decision upon that. And then we have the behavioral traits. They are also, in Sweden, the STAR method is super popular. I'm guessing you're using the same thing here with situational-based questions. The problem with situational-based questions is it's a good foundation. But the problem with them is that we, as a recruiter, feel like they are super boring because we need to ask all the questions at the same questions to all candidates in the same way, and then all of a sudden we get tired. So sorry, all candidates that went through my processes because I was tired of asking the same questions all over and over again. This product doesn't get tired. It doesn't get hungry. It doesn't have a fight with their husband in the morning, and it doesn't favor candidates who are number 5 in the process, so that's also good. And then, so the additional cues I mentioned, it could be things that are, do you have experience in this area? Do you have this skill? Can you rate that skill from a 1 to 5 or a 1 to 7? Are you comfortable working with this sort of tasks? How do you tackle a new environment? And they can also be tailored from the recruiter perspective. And then we have the personality traits, so we measure social confidence, assertiveness, activity level, task confidence, diligence, and goal orientation in this product. And sort of depending on the process that you're looking for or the process that you are recruiting for or the role, you can extract different traits for different roles, of course. But these are also the ones, so we've been working super closely with scientists, of course. So it's been validated in Sweden. It's also on the DNV, which is a certificate for validation in northern countries. So we also know that the questions being asked also has a validation point. And then the behavioral questions and into the system then later on, as a recruiter, you can see the scoring from the personality traits, you can see the matching point from the additional cues, and then as an extra thing in the product, which I feel is really good from the recruiter's standpoint, is like that can also take me from point A to point B much faster in the beginning of the process, is skipping the phone interview. Because what's the phone interview for? I just want to check a few things. Hi, Elin here from Recruiter. Sounds good. Nothing wrong with the voice. Nothing wrong with that. It is a real person at the other end and so on. So this is basically the thing that we need to check here. So it's actually built into the system to listen to the candidate's answer when it comes to situational questions. So you can add your sort of recruiter skills at the end. You first get a short list, and then you can add your recruiter skills at the end, saying that, yeah, it meets my expectations according to the definition of the task or the definition of the trait or the role. Sort of, it's up to you. But I think this is, from the recruiter perspective, this is one of my sort of key elements for making a decision in recruiting, to also understand, add that extra little layer to the process. And then evaluate the potential. You can toggle the shortlist depending on what kind of traits you're looking for at that moment. Okay, I just want to toggle everything that's people that are available next week or on Monday. You can also, one thing that we've been working with in Sweden is typically temporary hires. And for a temporary hire, recruitment companies, they put out their adverts on Fridays, and then they want people to hire on Mondays. So they let their sort of advert be placed on the weekend, and then they have a lot of work to do on Monday morning to sort of just put in the temps in correctly. So what we've been doing with them is to work very much with this shortlist. Okay, I just want everyone that's available for a Monday. And I want them to interview on Saturday or Friday night, and then you could just toggle that into as well. So the system will accordingly just put a pressure on the candidate. So now you need to do this really fast because there's someone waiting for your results. So that's also a great feature for temporary hires. And then from the candidate perspective, as I mentioned, as a candidate, if you've been one at one point, I know I have been, and then that's the feeling that I was left with. It's like, I just want to tell you how good I am at this role, or how good a fit I am. So that's basically what happens with the candidates. And everything is super transparent. They can reuse their interview. They only need to interview once. They own their data, so if they don't want their data to be there, they can just recall their information. They can do that even in the beginning of the process, which is, I think, is a good feature as well. Because one of the things that we've been experiencing lately is candidates ghosting recruiters and vice versa, which I feel is stupid. Why not just say that you're not interested anymore? Just hit the button. It's like, it should be so simple. But we've made it simple in this product. So we're using it much for unbiased hiring methodology, of course, for high-volume recruitments. In Sweden, we do a lot of public hiring with our product because we have a high compliance rate in Sweden, where we always need to make sure that we can show how the decision in a process has been made. So we're coming into that with the algorithms later on, but that's actually something that is being able to provide us with that information. How was the decision made? Well, look at this. Otherwise, in a process, you're more like, yeah, well, what's that gut feeling again? The gut feeling made the decision, so it's really hard to prove that from a compliance point. And then, of course, using it with talent pipelines or seasonal hiring and so on. I just wanted to mention some of the cases that we've been working with before going into all of the other stuff. We have a few more minutes. So SEB is one of the Sweden's largest bank. And from their perspective, diversity is super important. They are very forward-leaning when it comes to technology, but also they wanted just to make better decisions. So we worked super close with them. We're also working with, the recruitment agency that I came from originally, of course. But I also want to talk about this. One of the points that we always get when we try to replace humans with technology is, how trustworthy is it? How ethical is it? What are the sort of key points in understanding how much we can use technology and feel safe and comfortable in using technology for our decisions and feel sort of, engaged in that? So one of the things that I think is super important and that we emphasize a lot on is how to be specific about the AI or the technology and how it's being used in different contexts. So we only use AI in the sort of candidate interface to make sure that the experience for the candidates is super nice and super unique. So we use a lot of technology there, like voice to emotion, voice to face, text to face, etc., in order to make sure that everything that we do and the feelings that the candidate gets during their interview is being met, basically. We do a lot of continuous testing. For those of you who've been speaking about algorithms and so on, testing is crucial for understanding how data collection is being made and how the decision is being made at the end. Some people might think that we use face recognition. We don't. And I think that was actually one of the key decisions that we made in the beginning, because as you probably know, it's really hard to not being sort of put bias into the process with face recognition, because we look very much different from each other, and it will interpret people that are from the training data and so on. So we're not using that. And we're also not using personal data, which sounds a bit funny, right, when we're working with recruitment. But we only use the data that is correlating to the job or the role. So we're not using names. We're not using gender. It's not possible to put in your age. It's not possible to put in data of any kind that could be in somewhat a fall for discrimination. So for us, it was a no-brainer. Don't use the data. If it's not supposed to be made a decision upon it, don't use it. We only want to use data that could actually be correlating to something in future work performance or something that has with performance to do. So that's the easy question. So we need technology, right? Going back to that recruiter that I was 20 years ago, that was one of the key points for understanding more, putting technology into the process, letting technology do the heavy lifting of the process, collecting the data and putting me at the end where I actually do a good job, looking at the data, analyzing the data from a perspective where I can actually make a good hiring decision. So we should use it for mitigating bias. Some people might argue at the other way, like, wouldn't it just create bias? But as you also said, humans are more biased. So if we can choose, wouldn't we choose to mitigate bias if we can? And also how to understand potential. Otherwise, a recruitment process consists of hundreds, thousands, maybe even millions of micro decisions. How can we even make sense of that if we don't know how to measure it? And from the candidate perspective, I think that's one. If you wanted to bring something from my keynote today, otherwise than the crutches, you will remember that one. But that would be to focus on candidate experience. If we can use technology to make the place a little better for the candidate from the candidate perspective, and that they can feel that, well, this was a fun and engaging process, it's good for everyone. And then we also can create a larger talent pool. We can create more diversity because we have this large talent pool, so we don't need to sort of pinpoint people. And I think there's a lot of things that come from the candidate experience perspective. So that's me. I'm going to practice more of my Dutch, hopefully later on, and not thinking it's Swedish. I sort of felt like I had a seizure or something. I was like, it's not Swedish. But if you want to contact me, feel free to reach out. LinkedIn is always good, or bring me an email, or just grab me on the way out. I'll be happy to answer any questions. I was left out from the Q&A, luckily.
Well, first a big applause, I think, for you. Thank you so much, Elin. I'm also very happy to hear that humans are still involved in the decision-making process, so we won't be obsolete after all. I think that's great to end with today. We do have time for one final question from the audience. So is there someone feeling brave? Yes, Adina is feeling brave to ask a question.
Hi. My question is around how is the data used to generate a result or an assessment. I would be curious to understand, do you use like a majority or like a majority statistics? And if yes, then how do you prevent discriminating the neurodivergent people, which are by default not part of the majority. So when there are personality traits or when you are assessing different characteristics, I guess I'm curious, how do you avoid discriminating minorities?
I think the question is much bigger than just the product, though. I just want to mention that. But from our perspective, I think it's important to understand what kind of traits that we're looking for to start with. Normally, when we do a manual recruitment process, the number one thing is social skills, which might be hard for some people, and we're not in our right element. But if we look at the traits that are actually doing a difference for the role, it might not only be social skills. It might be a lot of different skills. So it's important to understand how to measure that. And we, otherwise, from that measurement, it's basically like a personality traits test. So it's basically the same thing, but I think that when you look at this from this perspective, you tend to choose it very sort of data-wise instead of, okay, we're looking for Alfred, or we're looking for Elin or Ellen, or we tend to, I think that we need, the question is bigger because it needs also a lot of unbiased training so people know what they are looking for in terms of bits and pieces and not persons. But from that perspective, we provide an environment for those people to actually do that, and to go into some sort of more deeper into what kind of traits they're looking for. And from the other perspective on when it comes to neurodiverse talents, we could actually see an increase of neurodiverse talents at the end of the process, mainly because we provide an environment that feels safe and secure for that sorts of candidates. They can prepare, they can do their interview when they're up for doing it, and not being pressured by someone else in a room between 4 people or 2 people. So I think that's one of the environment perspective is super important also. Thanks. Did I answer your question?
Good. Thank you so much.